My name's Adele Onyango and welcome to another episode of Legally Clueless. No, seriously, I have no clue what I'm doing, but I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one. Hey you, welcome to another episode of Legally Clueless podcast. Super excited that you're part of the tribe. Remember, you can connect with us online on Twitter, use the hashtag Legally Clueless, and on Instagram, we're at Legally Clueless Podcast. Audio episodes go out every Monday, and on our video series, we have season 1 that's ongoing, which you can check out on our YouTube channel. New episodes go out there every Friday morning. Ooh, don't forget, links to both our YouTube channel and our Insta page are in the show notes. So this episode features part 2 of Valentine's story. Of course, part 1 was in episode 118. And it's quite a heavy story, hence the reason I split it up. In this second part, themes of sexual molestation do come up, which I know can be very triggering for many people. So in case that's you, you may want to sit out this podcast from this point, because I'm about to play a snippet of the story that also has a bit of that in it. Yeah, so you may want to just hit pause on the story and come back at a point where you feel strong enough to be able to listen.
So we got to my lawyer's office and he tells me this is going to be very difficult, but it's gotten dirty. So he gives me a bunch of papers to read and my heart just sank. He now claims that my son had been sexually molesting the sister. Policemen came to the school and they said they're here to pick up your son for questioning. My ex personally came with the cops in his car, so they were not even in a cop's car. And the school tells me, I'm sorry, but you have to come to school right now because the cops are here and they have an arrest warrant and they've said they're not leaving without him. He says, okay, put them in the cell. So this time they put us like in the holding cell. So it's myself, my son, and like 3 other men inside there. But I'm just holding my son's hand. I'm just trying to comfort him and tell him it's going to be okay.
That is part 2 of Valentine's story, which was coming up a little later on 100 African stories in this episode. But before we get there, I do hope you're having a peaceful, graceful day, week, whenever it is that you're listening to this, and just hanging in there in case you're battling some stuff. And before we jump into the story and the song of the week, what I do want to touch on is just like some business growth I'm experiencing. I feel like I am close to teenagehood in business, like growing up, you know what I mean? I want to touch on something that has really fueled a lot of my doubt when it comes to my business decisions, and that's walking away when you know a deal isn't serving you. It's very hard to walk away from these deals. It's hard also because it's just like, am I making the right decision? Am I thinking too much of myself? But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me break it down for you. So in the last couple of months, I've had to walk away from potential partnerships just because the terms weren't right, or it just didn't feel like I was getting an efficient business partnership. Efficient in that I would not be running on a loss, you know? So the first one has got to be that stung a few months ago. There's this international company that had reached out. They're doing a documentary, and it was a global documentary, and they wanted me to host the African leg of it. I was like, this is fantastic that they even know my name and that I exist. Wow. And I went about having calls with them and then giving them my rate, which they tried to negotiate me down. Obviously, you give a bit of a discount, but their rates were so much more. They were really low. They were really, really low. It just wasn't feasible. It just didn't make any sense to do that job because the terms just, again, didn't make sense on my end business-wise. So I had to walk away from that job. And I remember feeling so disheartened about it. And like the week afterwards, I was just like, maybe I need to review my rates. Maybe I need to like bring them a bit lower. But I think one thing that's helped me, kabisa, like have tons of confidence when it comes to my rates is that I cost everything. Every little or big thing that contributes to me doing my job and doing my job well is written down as a cost, which contributes heavily to what my rates are. So, you know, when I'm having those doubts, I just have to go back to that and be like, hey, sis, hey. Can we get back to track? But yeah, that one really stung. And even now, just talking about it, I'm just like, maybe I could have handled it better. But no, I think whatever, that's doubt. Second one is a local company. I feel like what I did with this one is at the beginning, I could feel like I wasn't meant to be in that partnership. But there's this thing in business you do where you're like, oh my God, this is going to take care of whatever costs I have for the next 3-4 months. So, hey, just do it. But if I really go back to the beginning, internally, I was not feeling like there was a fluid connection between myself and the brand. But hey, it's business. There's no time for feelings of fluidity and stuff. But this one didn't work out because the contract terms were absolutely terrible. And I'm glad it didn't, because the rates that I had negotiated when I went back to my books, it would be very close to me running on a loss. So the universe just did me a solid. They gave me a terrible contract and I had to walk away from it. This one I bring up because quite a few people didn't walk away from that partnership, and it can make you like question whether you are running things right, whether you're not in sync with the market, you're not in sync with how Kenya is running its stuff. But yeah, that's the second one, and that's the doubt that came with it. The third and final one happened last week. I got a call from this agency. They had a client and they were like, yo, we're looking for like 3 to 4 month partnership, which is fantastic. It's in line with my goals for this year, which was like, I'm really looking for more long-term partnerships, more long-term advertisers, stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, oh my God, this is so great. Sent my rate card, everything, to which they agreed to like most of the stuff on my rate card. But then this thing called agency fee popped up. And, you know, they sent me, when I sent my rate card, they had agreed to it. And then they sent me like a breakdown of all the costs and stuff and what they would be paying me based on their client's budget, right? Remember, this is the go-between, the agency. And so when I'm adding, I remember when they sent that email, I was out on a shoot. So I was like reading the numbers really quickly, but I was like, these numbers don't add up. But then again, I'm really not bad with numbers, but I require more time than the average person when it comes to math and adding up things, which is not bad. It means I'm very focused when it comes to numbers. So I was like, I'll just give it more attention. Maybe it's me not really adding up things right. When I came back home, I'm like, like a huge significant amount is missing from this total. Where the heck is that amount? Where is it? Because numbers have to balance. When I read the fine print, there was something like an agency fee, which is where this amount had gone to, which doesn't make sense because I'm not your client. Why am I being charged an agency fee? What the hell is this? It felt a lot like you're trying to clean up kickbacks. You know what I mean? Like, because like, why are you charging me an agency fee? It really doesn't make any logical sense. And so I responded in an email asking about that because I was like, hey, maybe there's something I'm not understanding. And I was just like, hey, I don't understand why I'm getting charged this when I'm not your client. Needless to say, I did not get that job. Oh my goodness. But I have to say, it felt good walking away knowing that like I was standing for something. But then the doubt comes when you're like, you know, when I do a breakdown for all the business that I do and for this podcast and for myself, I have very clear values. And one of them can really be rounded off to like just wanting to do business in an ethical manner, which is so hard not to shit on us, it's so hard in Nairobi. It's so hard. And this is something that I've experienced even before I left traditional radio to do my own thing, where you'll be part of a campaign and because you're not paying kickbacks, your payment gets delayed or something, or you actually just don't even get the job. Oh my God, that has happened before. I forgot about that guy. Yeah. And it's just like, I'm here to do a job. You're here to do a job. What is all this shenanigans happening? And sometimes it makes you doubt, like, am I the foolish one wanting to run a business ethically? But even when those doubts come, so like after this last encounter last week, literally the next day, I got 3 calls for potential business partnerships that respects my business values, which is great. But at the back of my head, I'm just like, it's so irritating to have to defend wanting to do business the right way or the ethical way. I just needed to vent about that. And then the other last thing I will say about this is it's so funny, this business journey. You do not have the time to mope about when you lose business or a partnership isn't seen to fruition. There's no time to sit down and be like, oh my God, I really wanted to work with that company. What is happening? There's no time because for me, I was working on reports for one client, doing production for another, and you kind of have to just keep moving, which is great because you don't want to sit in misery, but it also means even for your wins, you don't have time to be like, oh my God, I did that, because it's just like, hey, did you send so and so the report? Oh my goodness, I have not. So it's just interesting, a very interesting space I'm in business wise, because it's the most conscious I've been about my business in years. It's probably the first time I've willingly allowed the words business and entrepreneur in my space, just because mine doesn't look like what traditional businesses do. So you kind of shit on it because of that, but I'm working on that. So I just want to always share where I'm at, especially with that journey. All right. I don't know why I sang that. Let's jump into the song of the week, which is really dear to me because I randomly re-stumbled on the song. It's very old. It's so dear because it's my sister Amanda who introduced it to me. She really introduced me to so much music. She introduced me to a lot of hip hop, surprisingly. I remember she also introduced me to Ludacris. If you know Amanda, you can understand how shocking that would be. When we were younger, she would listen to different genres of music. I was stuck on my Erykah Badu's, Bob Marley. Who else was I listening to at the time? Yeah, well, that type of music. She was listening to hip hop, R&B, rock, a lot of rock, especially the rock. I'd just be like, that sounds like noise, turn it off. But she introduced me to this particular song, and then I randomly on YouTube heard it, and I felt like I was 15 years old again, and my big sister is introducing me to music, and it was just so wonderful that I was like, I just need to share this song with you. It's by Nelly Furtado from back in the day. The name of the song is Powerless, and I also really love the lyrics. I feel like the lyrics are quite poetic. Yeah, I really actually do love the lyrics and the harmony towards the end. Oh, it's so awesome. So the name of the song is Powerless. I have put a link to it in the show notes. If your platform, the platform you're listening to this on, doesn't show you the show notes, just search for Nelly Furtado, Powerless, and enjoy. Okay, let's jump into part 2 of Valentine's story on 100 African stories. Obviously, remember part 1 is in episode 118. You may want to listen to that first if you haven't, because then you'll just be floating through this part 2. And essentially, the story is really about the extent to which her ex-husband went to frustrate her quest to get a divorce from him, and just how much he hated her son. I'm going to repeat this again. There are themes around sexual molestation that come up which could be triggering to some. 100 African stories on Legally Clueless. Stories from Africa.
And then I filed for divorce, and I filed for custody, and I thought it was going to be a normal process. The first hearing, when we went to court for the custody proceeding, we're in court, and so I'm there with my lawyer, and he's there with his lawyer at that time. I've left the kids with the nanny, and my folks are there as well with me in court. As we're in court, then his lawyer stands up and says they filed some papers and they wanted the magistrate to make a ruling. It's an urgent application. It's in the best interest of the children. The children are in danger, something. So I'm getting confused. I'm like, what's happening? And so my advocate then says they've just received the papers that morning, and he says they would need time to review and to consult. And so the magistrate declines to give the orders because they were asking for the kids to be separated, and I didn't understand why at that point. So the magistrate says no, the kids remain with the mom. He was granted access to see his daughter in school, and then we were told to come back on a later date. So when we're leaving the courtroom, my lawyer asks me, where are the kids? So I say they are at home. With who? And I say with the nanny. And he says, you need to tell your mom to go home to the kids as quickly as possible. And I'm like, what's happening? He's like, first tell your mom to go home to the kids and then we'll talk. So I get a cab and I tell my mom, you guys go home to the kids and call me when you get there and tell me if they're fine. My mom goes. So we go to my lawyer's office and he tells me this is going to be very difficult, but it's gotten dirty. So he gives me a bunch of papers to read, and my heart just sank. So I read the papers, and they filed in court. And the reason for asking the kids to be separated is that he now claims that my son had been sexually molesting the sister. As proof or as evidence, he has attached an affidavit from the nanny. So this nanny had been with us from when the baby was like a year old. By then she was 4. And the nanny is saying that this happened when the baby was between a year and 2 years old, and that he would touch her inappropriately with his fingers. And so this, if it happened between a year to 2 years, this is like 2 years later. And so my first thing is like, what, where, how, when I was so, confused. So that's when my lawyer just looks at me and he tells me, I'm sorry, but he must have gotten advice, so to speak, that for a mother to be denied custody, it's only when she's declared unfit by the court. And the grounds for being declared unfit are you're either like very heavily into drugs or a heavy alcoholic, like you can't take care of your children, or if your home is declared unsafe or unfit. And how could a home be declared unsafe? If there's violence or if there's sexual molestation. So they had gone for the biggest one, so to speak. So my mom got home. She found the nanny with the kids and she just called me and told me, no, the kids are fine. Then she kept asking me, what's the problem? What's the problem? I told her, no, I'll come and I'll explain. So the lawyer tells me, no, we'll just do our response. Does a child have a pediatrician? Do you have the hospital records? etc. Because if a child was being molested, and especially at that age, it would be picked up especially given she's still getting immunizations and stuff. If it's a child who regularly sees a pediatrician, especially or goes to the hospital for checkups, it would be picked up. She had also started school, and so was like also check with the school, because also the school, if your child is in a proper kindergarten, she was in a Montessori school, those are things that they are trained to pick up on, And so we started the journey. And so at that point again, I thought this is just like a reaction to the divorce and to me leaving, and that it would blow over. I didn't think it would go to the extent to which it ended up doing. So we filed our responses. I attached all the medical records. The pediatrician wrote a letter and said, I've been examining this child and there's nothing to that effect and all that. So we filed it, and that was around March of 2019. And I thought, okay, this will blow over at some point. And so I sent my son back to school. I never told him what was happening. Of course, I let the nanny go. I took her back to the bureau where I'd gotten her from. I explained to the guy who runs the bureau, this is what has happened, this is what she has claimed, and under the circumstances, then I can no longer work with her. But I paid her all her dues, including leave days, releasing her without notice period, and all the stuff that the Kenyan law dictates. So I did all that, and thought, okay, let's start afresh. Around May of that year, my son is back in school, and I had then been granted access by the court to go back to our the home we had, so that I could pick up our personal belongings. We'd left without our clothes, books, everything. We'd left everything there. So the court had said the rest of the property would be divided post the divorce, but then I could be allowed access to pick up my clothes, my kids' clothes and toys and stuff like that. So went there. It was on a Saturday, went with a few of my friends and a cousin of mine. We picked up the stuff. I found all the stuff packed up, and then like all my books and I'm an avid reader. There was like 3 boxes of books, and they had all been soaked in water, essentially all destroyed. My son's stuff, you'd find one item and not the other. Like, for example, the PS didn't have the cable, didn't have the controllers. You'd find one shoe and not the other one. So just the only things that we found intact were like my baby's stuff. So finished picking up my stuff, and I go back home, and I'm seated at home, and for some weird reason, being a Saturday, I try as much as possible not to check my work mail on weekends. So I pick up my phone and I go to my email, and I find an email from the school. And the school has written, "Hi, we are really trying to reach you. Please call us back as soon as you can." So I look at my phone and there's no missed calls. Then it hit me. They must have been trying to reach me on my older number. So what happened is, post the divorce, I then stopped using the number that I used to have. And so I quickly called the administrator back, and I'm like, "What's it? Is my son safe? Is he okay?" And they're like, "No, no, no, he's fine. He's even gone for a school trip, but you need to come to school for a meeting." So I said, "Okay." So I thought maybe because with all that was happening, maybe he was having troubles coping or adjusting. So I said, "Okay, fine, I'll be there." So I was still with my sister-in-law, and I asked her to drive me to school. So, and I kept asking, "Can you at least give me a hint so that I prepare?" And they told me, "No, no, no, you come. We'll discuss when you get here." So I get to my son's school, and I find the administrator. He calls the head of security, and the head of security comes, and he tells me, "This is what happened yesterday." Now, that being a Friday, some policemen came to the school, and they said they're here to pick up your son for questioning. And they said it's because he's been molesting the sister and you've been covering it up. So they wanted to take him away. But being the cops were from Limuru, that's where we used to stay. His school was in another location. Because of the way I think the rules of the cops work is that when you go to somebody else's location, you must seek their permission to arrest anybody or to enter any other premise in that jurisdiction. So when they went to the other cop station, the OCS of that particular cop station told them that, "Sorry, but this being a minor, we can't allow you access to the school unless you either come with a warrant of arrest or you come with the mother." Because the mother is the one who signed him up to the school. So by this time, the OCS had called the school and asked, "This child, he's under whose care?" And they say, "The mom." They're like, "Do you know the dad?" Then they say, "No, we've never even seen him. He's been in this school for more than 2 years, but we've never seen him. And he's not even..." So they said, "But give us time to check the file and everything." So they check the file, and they say, "He's not even on the file because he never wanted him. So I never put him on any of the documentation." So they say, "Okay, can you guys call them the mom?" So this is all happening on Friday. So that's when they had been trying to reach me. And I think these are those things that work by God's miracles, because they kept trying to reach me on the old number, which I had switched off. And the lady in the admin office totally forgot where she had written my new number. So they did manage to get me on Friday. So they tell me that they hung around apparently from mid-morning to almost the end of the day. And he tells me, being a Friday, these people had really pre-planned this because the intention was to pick him up and keep him in the cop station for the whole weekend until Monday. But they didn't manage. So he told me that's what happened. And then he said the OCS of the station said that when you come, you need to go and see her so that she also explains to you in detail exactly what they said and what they wanted. So I go to the cop station of that area where my son's school was, and she gives me, and I don't find the OCS, but I find another lady, but she tells me this is the number, you can call her. She had gone on an official function, but you can call her. So I call her and she explains to me. She tells me that my ex personally came with the cops in his car, So they were not even in a cop's car. And they explained that story. And so she did the checks that she did with the school. And then she told them that having checked with the school and found out that he's not listed in the school even as a parent, she cannot compel the school to release him. And so that's when she told them, you look for the mom. If the mom comes, then we can go to the school. But she says, but even then, we would be releasing the boy to the mom because you people don't have an arrest warrant. So that was it. And she told me that you need now to go to Limuru, to that particular police station there, and hear from them. Because she told me, have you ever heard of this before? And I told her, I've never heard of it from the cops. I only heard of it a few weeks ago from the court papers, but I never thought that he was serious about this thing. I just thought he's making wild allegations and we would clear it up. And since we had given our responses, we were waiting for the court date. So I never thought it would come to this. After that, I went with my sister-in-law again, we went to Limuru. So I passed through the office. I got copies of all the court documents and everything so that in case they needed to see, I would have them. So we get to this cop station and they were like, it's like they had been waiting for me. I walked into that deputy OCS's office and he just tore into me and he's like, wewe ndio ule mama amekuwa akizingira mtoto wake. So translate to English, it means like, you're the mom of that boy who's been molesting the daughter and you've been protecting him and not wanting to do anything about it. And I'm like, hey, hold up. Nothing like that has happened. And they're like, no, you've been protecting him, you've been shielding him. How can these things happen and you don't report? And he's like, that is an offense. So I told him, no, okay, hear me out. This is my side of the story. So I attempt to give a rundown of it. And then he says, no, we want you to bring the kids here on Monday to this police station for a medical check. So I said, okay, that's okay, but please give me a documentation that says why am I bringing the children? Who am I bringing the children to? What is going to be done? What is this medical exam? The guy flipped, the deputy OCS. He told me this is obstruction of justice. You cannot question a policeman. And in the blink of an eye, I had been thrown into the cell, not even what they call the holding cell, like the real cell inside the police station. My phone has been taken away and they said, yeah, since you refused to bring the kids and you're obstructing justice, you're going to stay there until we can take you to court on Monday. So the good thing is that all this time I had been with my sister-in-law. So when she saw what had happened, this time it's like 6 p.m. on a Saturday, just started making phone calls and we just through calling so many people, someone managed to tell us what the name of the OCPD of that division was, and somebody else managed to get the number, and so she was called and she was explained to, and she came and then she asked what had happened and the explanation was given, and she said, okay, let her be released on bail of 10,000. But she also said the same thing, that I bring the kids for a medical exam on Monday. So we paid the bail and I was released at about 10 p.m. at night. So after I was released, went to meet up with my lawyer the following day. Of course, he'd been called by that point and he'd been explained to what's been happening. And so he said the best thing is to go to the court in that particular location and file under certificate of urgency for the court to rule on what should be done next, whether the kids should be brought in to that to do the medical exam or what should be done. So we did that on that Monday. So I didn't go with the kids on that Monday. The magistrate we found in that court acted very fast. He managed to give orders that we all appear on a certain day, I think a few days after that, and then we started the process of the court process. I was given an whole interim order not to go ahead with the medical exam at the police station. So after hearing to both sides and the cops, the court made a ruling that the kids should be reviewed by an independent panel of doctors through the Kenya Medical Board, and then we were supposed to follow that process. So that's what we did. Went to the Kenya Medical Board. They appointed some doctors. The kids were examined. So physical examinations. They also did like a whole psychological psychiatric evaluation. So both of them together, where I think they assess how do the kids relate to each other, and then each of them separately to see whether any of them is lying or any of them has been coached into anything. And then the reports were submitted. So we went through that whole process. It took about 2 months, about 2 months, because started in May and into June. And then at the end of it, so I didn't attend any of the psychological evaluations. I only took the kids for the physical examinations because they were staying with me. But again, I had no access to the reports because they were to be filed with the court and with the medical board. So we did that whole process. And again, I thought, okay, this is it. Meanwhile, on this other side, in the children's court, they still kept trying to bring up the same issue over and over. And the court would just be like, we are dealing with custody here. If that other matter is being dealt with in another court, let it proceed. If anything comes out of it, then you can bring in that report or that evidence here. So in July 2019, I'm sitting in my office and I get a call from my lawyer and he tells me, okay, we've gotten a notice of appeal that they filed in the High Court in Kiambu. So Limuru was the lower court, so in Kiambu. And they've managed to get stay orders, which means that the orders of the lower court don't hold anymore. And so he told me what this means essentially is at any point they can come after your son again. So I was like, okay, so what does this mean? He said, essentially you need to notify the school, just do what you can do to make sure that at least you're present if it comes to that. So that's what I did. And at that point, I actually asked for permission to go and talk to him. So I talked to him. Earlier on, when I was taking them for the medical exams, I had to explain to him why they were being done. So he told me he's not surprised. And I asked him, why would you say that? He told me, but he hates me. So I'm not surprised that he would do this. So during that time, about a few days after we got the appeal documents, I had been talking to some few people, and someone just told me, go to the DCI headquarters. So that's the Directorate of Criminal Investigations headquarters in Kiambu, and just talk to them, because at the end of the day, all criminal matters fall under them, and just explain what's going on and the frustration you're having with the cops at Limuru and how this whole thing is turning out. So I went and I talked to officers there, and they referred me to Kiambu to see the head of criminal investigations there, and again presented all the paperwork and everything. And he called the other police station in Limuru and he had a conversation with the cops there. And at the end of the day, it emerged that one, I had never recorded a statement, because even when I was thrown into the cell, they never recorded my statement. They never listened to my side of the story. So he said, they asked whether the boy's statement, my son's statement, had been recorded. They said no, it hadn't been recorded either. And they asked whether my mom's statement had been recorded, because in their paperwork they claimed that the nanny had told my mom about it, and my mom had told her to keep quiet about it. So of course she was implicated, and so she also had to record a statement. So he told me, okay, as a first step, because I've talked to them, you need to go, and you need to go with your son and with your mom, and you guys record your side of the statement so that the file is complete, and then we can review the file when it's complete. So that's what we did. So picked up my kids from school again, both of them went to the police station. I recorded my statement. My son recorded his statement. When we finished, they said that the reason why they wanted the baby is because they wanted to record her statement. She was 4. So I asked them, how do you record a statement of a 4-year-old? They said, no, they have children officers who help with that. So I called the senior DCI officer who had told us to go. He said, he didn't know exactly how they intend to go about it, but he told me, anyway, since we're there to cooperate, just see, so long as it's children's officer, then see how it's being done. As long as it's safe, you can proceed. Then when we finish, they bring a police car and they're like, we need to go to the district hospital next door. And I'm like, why are we going to the hospital? And they say, no, we've decided that we're not going to record a statement for your baby because she's small, but we're going to do a medical exam on her. So it had fallen back to that same medical exam. So I say I can't, I'm not consented to it. And before we do the medical exam, can I have the pediatrician present? so that he can also ensure that what they're doing is safe. He can also be there. Kind of like the way and by that time, of course, I'd been consulting with the lawyer and they said, yeah, in the Children's Act, yeah, it's allowed for you to have your independent doctor. Just the same way, like if a postmortem is being done, there's a government pathologist who does it, but you can have your independent doctor there. So I kept trying to tell them, no, you have to give me like 30 minutes for the pediatrician to arrive, and they flatly refused. And they're like, we're doing it now. So getting to the district hospital, and they said, after all, we don't even need your consent because the father has already consented. So when I came out is when I realized all this time when we were recording our statement, they had called him. So he was hanging around there. So now we are at the district hospital and we are all there. These two doctors, one was a guy, one was a lady, no name tags, no documentation showing they actually work in that hospital. Come in, we are shown into some room and they tell me to undress the baby. So I undress her. Of course, by this time, they've threatened me again with throwing me in with obstruction of justice, etc. And they do this medical exam. So, like, the way you do like an ENT check where you check the eyes, you check the nose, you check the ears, they felt around the throat. Then the lady doctor takes her phone. So the touch of the phone is what she uses to look inside my daughter's vagina. And so I'm wondering, what medical exam is this? I mean, being a woman, I've done pap smears, I've gone for gynecological checkups. I was trying to rack my brain, like, how do you check inside the vagina using the phone or the touch, the flashlight of the phone? But at that point, I was like, I don't want to antagonize these people. Let me just keep quiet. So she checked. Then I could hear her whispering, and she was saying, but the hymen is intact. Then I'm like, oh, can you tell hymen is intact by looking with the flashlight? I was like, okay. Then they say, okay, dress her up. And then they sat and wrote some report. So when they wrote the report, then I asked them, okay, can I get a copy of what you've written? And the cop again started being very defensive, and he's like, we'll give it to you when it's ready. And then the two doctors, the cop, and my ex all go into a corner. And it's like they are walking together and they are whispering. And so I'm like, this is a bit odd. If we are all equal in this conversation, why am I being treated so awkwardly? And them, it's like they are pals and it's like they know each other. Long short of it, I follow them to we all go back to the police station, and I insist I need to get a copy of that report. And finally, they give me a copy, and they've written that her vagina is red. And so I look and I'm like, okay, you're alleging molestation that happened 2 years ago, but you're writing a report today that says the vagina is red. Anyway, I said, I'm not the medical doctor, so I just took it. I booked an appointment with the pediatrician for the next day, and I went and I showed it to him. And he just told me, okay, this, of course, is one of those things that is done maybe to support a certain claim, but let's wait and see where it will go. So after that, they filed some additional papers using now that report. And then he also went to like one of the private hospitals where we'd been like 2 or 3 times when we'd not been able to see the pediatrician. And in all of those ones, she had been diagnosed with a throat infection, and then one of them was a UTI. And so they attached the result of the time she had been diagnosed with a UTI and say that the UTI was caused by the sexual molestation. So again, we just respond, and I attach all the previous records that showed she had been treated for a throat infection 2 times before that, so she was on antibiotics. So the antibiotics reacted with her, she got a UTI. We went back, and she was given medication to now clear the UTI. Then after that, I am told by the Kiambu office that they will review the file and that they will come back to me. So after some time, I get a response that the file has been reviewed and that it would not be proceeding any further. So I'm happy. I explained to my son, and we think that it's over. Then a few weeks later, again, I'm at work and I got a call. This time it's from the school. And the school tells me, I'm sorry, but you have to come to school right now, because the cops are here. This time they tell me everything. They tell me the cops are here and they have an arrest warrant, and they've said they're not leaving without him. But we've told them that we can only release him when you're present. But they're saying if you don't get here within under an hour, then they have no option but to go with him. So I just pick up my phone and I ask my colleague. By that time, I'm in tears, I'm shaking, and I tell my colleague, please just drive me. So she drives me all the way. It takes us about 40 minutes to get there, and we get there, and for sure, outside the gate there was a police car. So we get in to the principal's office. She explains to me and she tells me we really put our foot down because we couldn't just release your son. Again, a Friday. And so I talk, and she calls in the policeman, says, maybe explain to the mom, show her the documents you have. So he shows me he has an arrest warrant, and I take a picture of it. I send it to my lawyer, and then he tells me, yeah, we have to go with him. So I was like, okay, I don't want to traumatize him. Can you allow me to be the one to get him from class and to just tell him we are going somewhere with him? And then if you can allow, at least we get outside the gate before we get into your car. So he says, actually, we understand he's a minor, and even for us, we don't want to hurt him. So we will even allow you to just come with the car that you've come with. Since you have a car, just drive out. Then we follow each other all the way till the police station. So that's what we do. So my colleague, who's also my friend, myself and my son, we get into our car and we drive. And we get to the cop station. Again, when we get there, he's already there. So he's waiting. So of course he's been told that he's been taken there. So we get there, find the same nasty cop that we'd found the other time, and then he says, yeah, I told you I would end up finding you. How long did you think you would hide? He says, okay, put them in the cell. So this time they put us like in the holding cell. So it's myself, my son, and like 3 other men inside there. So first of all, I look and I'm like, again, the only lady, this is a minor, we're in a cell with like 3 men. But I'm just holding my son's hand. I'm just trying to comfort him and tell him it's going to be okay. So by this time, of course, my lawyer is running around trying to see whether he can get court in session so that he can post bail. Because again, being a Friday, if we don't manage to get out by then it means again the whole weekend. He's also trying to ask what's the charge against me, and they can't provide like the paperwork to support what are they charging me with. The cop just keeps saying she obstructed justice. So finally, I think when he really pestered him, another cop comes, he opens and he tells me to get out. So I say, no, I can't leave my son in there. And he says, no, we don't have any paperwork for you, so we can't keep you in a cell. So I said, no, I can't leave him. And they said, now if you refuse to come out, we will keep you there because you've refused to come out. So I quickly pray, and then I'm like, maybe it's better to get out so that I can also coordinate and see how we can help him. So I just told him, but can you then put him somewhere where he's not with these older men? And he says, okay. So he opens a small dingy room there that looked like a filing room or cabinet room or something, and puts him there. So I get out. By this time, my whole family is there. And my lawyer by that time had gone to the court. He managed to find a magistrate who was sitting, and he got an order because according to the Children's Act, minors should not be held overnight unless totally unavoidable. So the magistrate says the child needs to be presented in court so that she can determine whether bail can be set for him. So he comes back with that court order, and it's about 3:45 p.m. So it had been written, needs to be brought to court by end of day. So they dilly-dally, and then at about 4:15 they said it's officially the end of the day for police stations and for courts, so we can't release him. So my lawyer goes back to the court and tells the magistrate this is what has happened, and the magistrate issues another one that says he needs to be brought back whichever time within the course of that evening. So he comes back with it and pesters them, and then finally they get him out, but they fingerprinted him and then recorded that he's been booked for the offense of sexual molestation. And then we live in a police car. So we live in a police car, we go to the court, and then she hears us out. And he had exams that were starting the following week on Monday. And so she made a decision to release him so that he could sit for his exams. and we were told to report back in a week after he finishes his exams. For now, a proper hearing date, etc., to be set up. So again, the hand of God. I'm religious. I pray. My family had been praying about it, and we just kept seeing miracles every time. Because again, a Friday night, again almost 8 p.m. is when we were leaving the courtroom. So we left, we came home. Again, I explained to him, just reassuring him, telling him we're going to fight it, we're going to do the best that we can to get him out of it, and how sorry I was for having put him under the same to live life with someone who had now was trying to destroy his life. So after that, it became very clear that there was something that was happening between him and those cops there. Because despite the file having been reviewed by a higher police jurisdiction, they somehow found a way to charge him. And sure enough, by Monday, they had availed that charge sheet now to the children's court, and again was asking the magistrate in the children's court to separate the children, because under law, once someone has been charged with a crime, then it meant that it was enough to separate the children and to declare my home unfit. So they had filed that, but with the way, sometimes that's when you're kind of grateful for the way things may be turned slowly within our court system, because when they filed the paperwork, of course we have to be served with a copy of it. So came to know about it, and that really just triggered me into thinking, what next? What do I do? And then consulting with, again, a few other people, a few other lawyers, and someone said, the decision to charge someone with a criminal offense in this country lies with the ODPP, the Office of the Public Prosecutor, the DPP's office, and so the Director of Public Prosecution. And so say that is the ultimate office. So if you can go seek audience in that office and tell them what's been happening, then they can review this case and decide, yes, it has merit and go on with it, or decide to withdraw it. And so I was advised to go to the Nairobi office, because the Kiambu prosecutor is the one in Limuru was part of this group that had done the warrant of arrest and drawn up the charges. So if I went back to that office, I wouldn't probably get help. So I went to the Nairobi office. They are truly government officers and government offices that work in this country, and work well and work for people. I went in and I stated my issue, and I was directed, they have a children's department, and I was directed to the children's department, put in my case. I was asked to bring in all the documentation from when this thing started and how it's been mutating. And I was interviewed and I was cross-examined and asked so many questions, almost the whole day. And then I was told, okay, leave the file with us and then we'll come back to you. So on Monday. Now that Monday they were coming back to me was the Monday we were to go back to the court in Limuru for my son's bail to be reviewed. So I waited the whole weekend. I didn't hear anything. Then on Monday, we just went with my lawyer and with my son. And then while we were there, the head of the children's department that had met, she comes, and so she sees us and she says, okay, we've reviewed the file and would like to be present in court. And she doesn't say why. So we get into court, and when the magistrate hears that it's about my son's case, she says, this being a minor, we are not going to do it in open court. So we withdraw to her chambers, and then the head of the children's department from the deputy public prosecutor's office says they've reviewed the file. They see no cause to proceed with it. The charges cannot stand, and they give the legal reasons why. And at that point, the charges are withdrawn, and my son is told he's free to leave. And just that's how it ended. That particular phase ended. And so we leave the courtroom and we go home, and thank God, do a little celebration and think it's behind us. He didn't stop there. He went ahead to sue the DPP's office to say that he was not consulted when the charges were being dropped, and it went through the court motions again for almost another year. And the last round of the appeals was dismissed early this year, and that's when we finally managed to also wind up the custody issue in the children's court, because then we were finally able to provide documentation that shows those charges couldn't stand. By this time, of course, he is not offering any maintenance or support for his child. I've been doing it myself. And at that point, I just opted to ask the court to not to that I was withdrawing any request for any child support or any maintenance. I just wanted peace, and I would figure it out how to provide for the little one, because at least for my son, I've been doing it myself for the last 15 years, for her as well, because even over the last 3 years, he didn't do much. He had stopped paying the half of school, the 50% of school fees he was supposed to pay. He had stopped seeing her in school, so I said maybe it's just for the better that now that it's over, so it's granted custody. Yeah, we are now healing. We've gone through a lot of family counseling and individual counseling, especially even for the baby, because she's quite intelligent, and she would ask questions like, why was another doctor asking her to open up her legs? What were they checking for? Of course, she has questions about why did we leave our home, and stuff like that. And then she now, even her, she says some things. She'll remember stuff and she'll say, yeah, but dad never liked my brother. She makes comments like those. So we had to do counseling for her as well. But a lot of it for my son, especially, so that he can move on with his life. He can stop living in fear and stop looking over his shoulder, so that he can focus on his studies as well. And eventually, in his own time, he can choose how and whether to forgive. Yeah, and not let him like ruin his life. And because if he gets depressed, or if he doesn't excel, or if he doesn't do the things he likes doing, then this guy will have won.
Catch more African stories in the next episode of Legally Clueless. So first, I just have to keep thanking Valentine for just being so open and vulnerable with us. I can't even begin to imagine what going through that for years must have been like. My heart goes out to her kids, although it is good that they're all in group and individual therapy. That's something that is so needed, and like, your healing has got to be intentional. Yeah, my heart there's really not much to say other than just my heart going out to Valentine and her kids. That I'm a grown-up and I do not even know how I would navigate that. So what about toddlers and a child? Must be quite a struggle to navigate. So Valentine actually did fill out the Legally Clueless storytelling form, and that's how we connected, and I got to record her story. So if you want to share your story as well, just check out the show notes. There is a link to a Google form. You just fill it in and I will get back to you. That's for you who wants to share a story on the podcast. Recordings are done virtually for now because of this panoramic pancake, whatever you call it, we're in, which is great. It means that wherever you are in the world, you can actually share your story on this podcast. So yeah, go to that Google form and fill it out. I also must say a big thank you for all the kind voice notes I receive on the Legally Clueless hotline. Honestly, this particular one I listened to right before beginning to record this episode, and I was feeling like, do people care about this podcast? Like, is it getting monotonous? Why am I even doing this? That self-doubt is crazy, right? And I was feeling it. And so even hitting play on this particular message was hard. I was like, what if they say something like they hate the podcast because they don't like a particular thing, and I'm really trying my best. And then I hit play, and it was so sweet.
Hi Adele, my name is Graham Osmwendwa. I'm a stout listener of Legally Clueless podcast, and Adele, the stories are really interesting. All my travels, let me say, I think last week I was traveling. I've been traveling around, and every time Legally Clueless has been playing in my ears, to a point whereby even when I hear of a joke, I would just laugh myself out. Someone just next to me would be like, hey, Kwani, what is this guy doing? And then the worst thing is, I have these wireless earphones. So someone will be like, by the way, what is this guy listening to? And then my phone is normally maybe in my pocket or in my bag. So I'm listening to the podcast wirelessly. Let me tell you, Adele, your stories, not really your stories, but your platform has really strengthened me in some of the ways that I didn't even imagine. An example is when I was listening to episode 110 by Michael, this guy who was in SA, Fal's roommate or whatever, his friend. Yes. Yeah. It really made me get back to track, especially mentally. Some sense of also motivation. The best story. Okay, not really the best, but the one that made me even not realize that really we've been driving for 2 hours. Was it even 2 hours? I don't know how long it was. It was your sister's birth story. I was laughing because there's a time your sister was laughing and I'm like, you know what? Me, it's as if I'm just listening to Adele. Like, yo, can't you just hear from the laugh? This is Adele now. Also in my 20s right now. Currently based in Narok County. Yes, that is, yes. That is how remote it is. That is how we get to listen to your podcast. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Gray. Your energy is absolutely amazing, and love to you all the way in Narok, which of course is in Kenya. And I've been to Narok once before actually, and absolutely enjoyed very few days, but I enjoyed my stay there and the work that we were doing. Hopefully I will come back to Narok, fingers crossed, right? So thank you so much for listening to this episode to the very end. Remember, audio episodes go out on your favorite podcast streaming platforms every Monday morning, and our video series, well, season 1 of it is almost wrapping up actually on our YouTube channel. So make sure you check that out. New episodes there go out on Friday mornings. This podcast also plays on Trace Radio in Kenya. So you can listen to the episodes every Monday and Wednesday at 12 noon and 7 p.m. and every Friday at 12 noon. Head over to traceradio.co.ke for a list of the frequencies, yani how you can catch the podcast wherever you are in Kenya. And also, when you're on that website, you can stream Trace there. That's it for this episode of Legally Clueless. You can share this podcast with your friends. You can keep it for yourself. I'm not judging. Just make sure you're here next week for the next episode.